We're back now with our politics panel. Peggy Noonan is a Wall Street Journal columnist and a CBS News contributor. Tavis Smiley is host of the Tavis Smiley Show on PBS and author of Before You Judge Me. Susan Page is the Washington bureau chief for USA Today. And Mark Leibovich is the chief national correspondent of the New York Times Magazine and has the cover story this week on Donald Trump and his divide within the Republican Party. Peggy, I'm going to start with you first on the question of Brexit. We've seen both candidates grab this moment. Donald Trump on the golf links there, saying that he was right, that this was a good thing. Yeah. Hillary Clinton saying, Donald Trump, in a crazy world, you don't want to have a dangerous president like Donald Trump. How do you assess how each took this moment?
Well, Hillary still is, in a sense, one of the faces of the administration. The White House lost on this one. They had tried to convince Great Britain, don't leave Europe. Great Britain lost Europe, so that doesn't help Mrs. Clinton. And she reacted in a sort of reasonable, bureaucratic, well-wishing way. Trump's side, if you will, won. He got to claim, if he wanted to, that he is on the side of this populist wave that is sweeping across the Western democracies. I can't imagine he did himself that much good by saying, essentially, I'm glad they voted that way in England. By the way, it's good for me and my golf course in Scotland. Yeah. That seemed insufficiently serious.
Yeah.
Well, I'll leave it there.
Well, Tavis, because what Peggy's hitting on is that this is more than just an event that we look to the candidates to speak to, because as Marco Rubio said, the themes underlying this are present here in America. The idea that elites don't know what they're talking about, that there is an unrest that needs to be fixed. How do you feel like the candidates address this first round of responses to this?
If Trump thinks he won, first of all, it's short-term, Peggy, and second of all, it's delusional, I think. We've been talking a lot on this program, some great conversation today, John, about economic nationalism, and about globalization, but what some view as retrenchment, others view as race baiting. David Cameron made a huge turn to the right last year. He threw immigrants under the bus, tried to distance himself from the refugee crisis, tried to connect then candidate Khan, now the mayor of London, to ISIS. So clearly there was some race baiting in this campaign, and the rise of racial movements in the country, around the world rather, in this country are disturbing. So when you bring it back home to Donald Trump, and his mantra continues to be "Make America Great Again," there are three questions one has to ask very quickly. One, for whom? Number two, what halcyon days are you talking about going back to? When was America so great we want to return to it? Number three, what about those fellow citizens for whom they've been waiting perennially to experience the true greatness of America? And I think when people start asking those questions, it's not going to be a victory for Donald Trump.
Susan, we have the moment. Okay, that's fine. We've gotten through that news cycle. But both of these candidates are trying to win an argument. As we talked with Anthony, Republicans see this as an existential threat to America. And Donald Trump seems to be speaking to that. Hillary Clinton is saying, I've got a series of programs here that will help you in your economic pain, but listen to my series of programs. How do you see that conversation playing out going forward? Is it two separate conversations, or does it meet somewhere in the middle and the two candidates get to kind of actually adjudicate what might happen to our country?
You know, they do seem to be running for two different offices in some ways, although a lot of their focus is on how unacceptable the other candidate is. You know, and one problem, it seems to me, is that Hillary Clinton is making this argument that we heard in the Brexit debate, that it is too risky. It's catastrophic if you take this course. And voters in Britain decided they were willing to take a risk. They were just that dissatisfied. And the question is, I guess, Donald Trump is making kind of the same bet here. That voters are so unhappy with the status quo that they're willing to do something that seems quite risky. And look at the ad that you showed earlier, we don't need a volatile president in a volatile time. You know, I think there are a certain number of voters who say, this is a volatile time. Just exactly what we need is a volatile president.
Right, and if it's risky for the people who live in the fancy houses and the bankers and the people who've been making money. It's not, I've already been taking a hit economically. How much worse could it get? Mark, how do you think, you know, if this is a change election, sorry to use that old cliche, but Hillary Clinton is not the change candidate. Her argument is, though, there's change and then there's chaos. How do you think that plays out?
Well, I mean, I think certainly if Donald Trump wins, this will very much be a change election. I think Hillary Clinton is banking on the fact that she can, you know, I guess define Donald Trump to a point where the earthquake that Donald Trump would represent if he is elected would be far too destructive to be something that anyone should go forward with. So I think in that sense, it's a very, very clear choice. You know, as far as Brexit being predictive, I think instructive is the better word. That was the word Anthony used. I think the demographics are very different. I also think that there's several months, or 4 or 5 months now, that are going to pass in which fallout is going to be experienced in 401ks, at least on the global stage, where this becomes less an abstraction and more of a reality that people are going to be voting on.
I think the other thing, John, too, is that this, and I think to pick up on Mark's point, in the UK, they were voting on an issue. Here we're voting for an individual. Right. Those are two very different things. So to get to the issues that Donald is talking about, you got to get past the individual. And if the negatives remain as high as they do, and he keeps insulting everyone, it's a very different conversation issue, I think, Peggy, versus individual.
I actually agree with this point. There
Yes.
are many Trump supporters, well done. There are many Trump supporters who think Brexit is an indicator of Trump's inevitable victory. I sort of think, you know what? Trump himself is going to be the big indicator of Trump's inevitable or evitable victory. In other words, how he acts, who he is, how he proceeds for the next few months, his acceptance speech, the campaign he wages, that's what's going to determine his future. Brexit is not really a wave you can ride. It is simply a sign that in the West, people are pushing back against the way things have been for about 15 years that they don't like.
Susan, haven't we known, though, that voters are angry and upset for a while? I mean, because what I'm trying to figure out is, if you covered the Tea Party movement, you knew that people were unhappy. If you listened to all the politicians who've talked about economic inequality and stagnant wages, and this has been a conversation in politics for a while. Is there something new that's happened here, or is just Donald Trump the thing that is new?
One thing that I think has changed a little is we've known people have been unhappy about the state of their economy and about the cost of college and college debt and about the feeling kind of the American dream is slipping away. The additional layer, it seems to me, that we're hearing now is that people are saying, I've been telling my government about this and they aren't doing anything about it. And I think that is a theme we heard in Great Britain, and it is definitely something you hear in this country, talking to either Trump voters and also to Bernie Sanders voters.
And if you haven't been listening to me when I talk about it now, I'm going to shout.
But it also makes a difference, though. I think Susan's right, but I think it makes a difference, though, when you have someone, though, actively campaigning and appealing to those fears, not to your hopes and aspirations, but to your fears, and I think that makes a difference as well.
Mark, you wrote about the Republican Party and its embrace, sometimes non-embrace, of Donald Trump. Where is the state of that relationship?
I think it's precarious. I think in the last few weeks, just talking to Republicans, you look at these two big global events. You look at Brexit, you look at Orlando 2 weeks ago. And a lot of people that I've spoken to see these as big missed opportunities for Trump, because I'm not sure how the Brexit reaction on the golf course is going to play out over the next few days, but people do define these candidates in times of crisis, whether it's a change election or not, in these moments, and certainly the Orlando reaction, among a lot of Republicans I've spoken to for this story, and just generally find it very, very troubling, because it was a potentially presidential moment. This could have been a more presidential moment after Brexit, which it wasn't even clear that he knew what Brexit was a few weeks ago.
And one reason the Hillary Clinton people are spending so much money on ads in key states right now, more than 23 million already, is because it's like concrete being poured. So the concrete is being poured on these two candidates, impressions are being set, and as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to change things. By the time you get to the fall, when presumably the Donald Trump people will be advertising too, they'll need jackhammers to change the impression that's been set of Donald Trump.
All this is true, but you know what was interesting in Anthony's polling? It was that in each of the states he looked at, the battleground states, it was fairly close, but also Trump was holding on to Republicans. He may be losing Republicans in Washington. He may be losing Republicans in media land, but he's holding on to Republicans in Colorado and various states. That's so interesting to me. It's as if they're looking at all of us and saying, I don't care.
Right.
I want change.
And that's right. And Tavis, Hillary Clinton is spending, or her super PAC supporting her, spending mountains of money into these states. Donald Trump is not. There were all kinds of stories this week about the disparities in fundraising, in staff, and so forth. But what don't people know about Donald Trump, A? And B, if he is this other character running his own kind of way, maybe those old metrics don't matter.
I think one, and I've never believed that Trump needs as much money as Hillary. So I'm personally not buying into all the stories about the gap in their fundraising. He doesn't need it, number one. Number two, who is Donald Trump? I don't know. I keep asking will Donald Trump show up or stand up, because what he says in public, his friends say that's not the Donald that I know. But I think fundamentally, John, this election is going to be about what kind of nation we're going to be. Who are we really as a people? That's the ultimate question. And so the numbers, I think, may be interesting at the moment, but when people start to wrestle with that question, I think the Brexit vote is instructive because it makes a statement to the world who we really are as a nation, who we really are as a people.
But I also think, look, as sort of getting to Peggy's point, there is no Brent Scowcroft bump here for Hillary Clinton. There is no Richard Armitage.
Republican who endorsed
There's
Hillary
no
Clinton.
Hank Paulson bump. I mean, we're talking
In other
about
words, the establishment
elite Republicans versus the Republicans who actually vote in the Denver suburbs, in the Cleveland suburbs, in the Milwaukee suburbs, what have you. So again, this is the same disconnect we're talking about that played out somewhat, not completely analogously, but somewhat in England, and that we have to be very mindful of here.
Peggy, let me ask you a question. Marco Rubio, in my conversation with him, he has said the most peppery things about Donald Trump of any of his opponents.
Yeah.
But then he said, well, he gave a good speech last week. It seemed to me that Rubio's claims about Trump were about moral and character and judgment. But the speech he gave this week was about basically Hillary Clinton being no good.
Right.
That may be good politics, but does it get at the concerns people in the Republican Party have had about Trump's moral and temperament and judgment?
I think Trump's speech this week about Hillary Clinton had the effect of exciting some Republicans. They really wanted someone to bring it to her, and so he did. He did it in a new way, not in this way he was doing it a few months ago about Bill's enabler, but it was about money. It was about being the candidate of the hedge funders. It was questioning her judgment. So there was that. That might be what Rubio means in part, that it was a good speech. Rubio himself is interesting to me in that he appears to have been pressed to run again for the Senate. The assumption is he'll win the seat. But I look from far away and think if he is going to be a real Trump critic and separate himself deeply from Trump for reasons of conscience or whatever, fine. Trump won Florida and beat Marco Rubio by about 20 points in the primaries. And I just think Rubio may be putting himself in a difficult place. I'm not sure it's a safe seat if he's running for it.
Susan, we have just about 20 seconds left. There was news on the email front with Hillary Clinton. Didn't turn over an email that showed there were problems with her server. That's not good.
An important disclosure for two reasons. Number one, it showed that she was concerned about she gave a different explanation for why she had a private email server. She was concerned about the personal being accessible. It wasn't a matter of convenience, which is what she told the world.
Originally.
Secondly, she didn't turn it over. She deleted this email apparently, and it came up because it came through the aide that she had sent it to. So it goes right to those questions about honesty, trustworthiness, transparency.
And that email was about the problems that having a homebrew server would cause, so we'll end it there. Thanks to all of you, and we'll be right back.